Notre Dame just added another big piece, literally, to their 2026 recruiting class with a commitment of four-star offensive lineman Grayson McKeogh, and I believe a lot more commits are on the way. Plus, we've got a little mailbag at the end, so stick around. We're covering it all on today's Locked On Irish.
You are Locked On Irish, your daily podcast on the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, what's going on and welcome in. This is Locked On Irish, your daily Notre Dame podcast. I'm your host, Tyler Wojciak. I'm a Notre Dame alum, producer at Fox Sports, and I've been covering the Irish since 2020. This episode is brought to you by Monarch Money. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Visit monarchmoney.com and use code LOCKEDONCollege for 50% off your first year. I am thrilled to have you here with me on this Thursday evening, June 19th, and thanks for making this your first watch or listen of the day, even though I'm posting this a little bit later in the day than usual. Normally, I like to record the show the night before and drop it first thing in the morning, but I'm switching it up today because I'm expecting some very big recruiting news tomorrow from Joey O'Brien, and I don't want this episode to feel outdated once they make their decisions. That said, once they announce, you can expect a reaction video and podcast from me tomorrow. So if you have not subscribed yet, now is the time. Notre Dame is on the verge of a flurry of exciting recruiting news, and I'm going to be here to react to all of it. But today, we're going to start with the first domino to fall, the commitment of four-star offensive tackle Grayson McKeogh. This is a huge addition to Notre Dame's 2026 offensive line class, and it would not have been possible without the coaching staff absolutely crushing it during this past weekend's official visit. So we're going to talk about that. Then I'm going to get to your mailbag questions. It's been a few weeks since the last one, and even though we won't get to all of them today in this condensed version, please keep them coming. You can drop them in the YouTube comments, hit me up on X at Locked On Irish, or DM the Instagram account at Locked On Irish Pod. We're going to be doing more of these as we get closer to the season, but first, let's talk about Grayson McKeogh. He is a massive prospect, not just in terms of his profile, but in terms of his size. He's 6'7", pushing 6'8", 275 pounds. Although I got to admit, when I was on campus last weekend for a wedding, I did walk by a lot of the recruits. I saw Grayson McKeogh. He doesn't really look 6'7", or excuse me, he definitely looks 6'7". He does not look 275 pounds to me. Probably looks closer to 265, 270, but he looks like a great basketball player, but I think he has the perfect frame to add more weight once he gets to college. He plays at a very high-powered program, LaSalle College in Pennsylvania. He is listed as the number 20 offensive tackle in the 24/7 Sports Composite and the number 262 player overall. So here's how Notre Dame won the recruitment. McKeogh felt like a very strong Penn State lean going into last weekend's official visit. And then this past Sunday, right at the conclusion of this big official visit weekend for Notre Dame, the official Penn State NIL Collective put out a video on their Twitter account with Grayson, and he said he was going to make his announcement on July 1st. He didn't explicitly say that he was going to Penn State, but that felt like a pretty surefire thing. Then on Monday, no one really heard from McKeogh after the official visits. Not to say that it went poorly, but everyone kind of took the video as a sign of, okay, he came, he saw Notre Dame, but he feels like he is a better fit at Penn State. And then Notre Dame even offered another tackle in the class of 2026, which is pretty late in the game, Charlie Tom, who we'll talk about later on. But it felt like at that point, McKeogh was just not coming to Notre Dame. Oh, well, it happens. But then on Tuesday morning, rumors started to circulate that McKeogh had a change of heart after his visit and after he spent basically all of Sunday night and Monday thinking about his decision. All of a sudden, Notre Dame had a ton of momentum. He canceled his official visit to Texas, which was set for this upcoming weekend, and he made it official that he was committing to Notre Dame on June 18th, almost 2 full weeks before he was scheduled to make his announcement on July 1st. This is a massive win for Joe Rudolph, specifically the work that he had to do to add another very talented offensive line prospect to this class, and also Marcus Freeman as well. He was the architect of that whole weekend. The fact that he was able to make that big of a swing, to make that kind of a jump with McKeogh, just shows you the type of commitment and the type of success that the staff had with their official visit last weekend and all the guys they had on campus. And, you know, to beat out Penn State for a talented offensive lineman is one thing. To do it for a kid in Pennsylvania is another. And now Notre Dame has 2 of the top offensive line prospects in all of Pennsylvania committed to their class in 2026, Grayson McKeogh and also Tyler Merrill. So as for how McKeogh fits at Notre Dame, he is a true left tackle prospect. He's very tall, has very long arms, and he is a great athlete. Those are the three things you want in a modern left tackle. He has all the physical tools you want to succeed at the left tackle position, but he is going to have to spend a lot of time in the weight room to get up to 300 pounds or hopefully more than that before he's ready to start playing on Saturdays. But it seems like he's got plenty of time. Notre Dame has a bunch of good tackles in front of him. They've got Anthony Knapp is going to play there this year. Will Black is coming in. I don't know how long Emil Wagner is going to be around because he probably could go to the pros. Gerby Lambert. Like, Notre Dame has been stockpiling talent at tackle. Styles Prescott. Like, there's a bunch of different options, but I think McKeogh and his ceiling is right up there with any of those guys. So as long as he is willing to wait it out, work hard in the weight room, work hard with Orlando, I think he has a very, very bright future at Notre Dame. Even though he looks a little bit light, he is a very capable run blocker. He's not afraid to get in the mix, but he is going to have to get bigger and stronger in college. He's also going to learn how to explode out of a three-point stance because in high school, he just is in a two-point stance every single time, and he just gets by because he's such a better athlete than pretty much everyone who lines up across from him. He also has great technique. So he doesn't really have to get in a three-point stance and explode off the ball. He just can get by being the best player on the field, and that's what he's done so far. But I believe that he has the type of work ethic necessary in order to make those improvements and become a really, really talented college tackle. Overall, I think he has a super high ceiling, and you just think about all the different things you want in like a pro offensive tackle. You need to be able to move. You need to be able to be a great athlete and keep up with these extremely fast, big, strong defensive ends, and I think McKeogh can do all of those things. So he becomes the fifth offensive lineman to commit in this class, and he is a true tackle compared to pretty much every other offensive line prospect that Notre Dame got this year. It is interesting kind of how they do it. It's not like every year they get two tackles, two guards, and a center. Last year's class was very tackle heavy. And now this year's class, they have mostly interior guys, but then they added a true tackle in Grayson McKeogh, and they might add another one in Charlie Tom, who is the player that they offered this past week. Tom grew up a Notre Dame fan. His mom went to Notre Dame, so it seems like his commitment is inevitable. He's been rising up the ranks lately. He's almost like an Alistair Vallejo type where no one had really heard about him. Then all of a sudden, he's getting flooded with offers. So I would expect Charlie Tom to join the class, which would make 6 offensive linemen. That's a little bit more than I was expecting, but hey, this is the reality. When you're getting all these good players to come in, that is a good problem to have. Yeah, I'm sure there's going to be attrition down the road, but it's survival of the fittest these days, and I think McKeogh is absolutely going to be one of the fittest once he gets on campus in Notre Dame. So I just think this is a big, big win for the staff, a surprise win. Also another win over Penn State, which I'm sure the fan base loves because even though Notre Dame and Penn State don't play that often, it kind of feels like a rivalry has been bubbling, at least online, ever since that Orange Bowl game and Notre Dame's epic comeback to knock off the Nittany Lions and secure their spot in the national championship. But then you've got the beef going on, or at least the alleged beef, I should say, between James Franklin and Marcus Freeman at the press conference before the Orange Bowl, and it seems like throughout this offseason, that has been a topic of conversation because Notre Dame and Penn State have been going after a lot of the same guys, including Joey O'Brien and Kari Adams, who is set to make their announcements tomorrow. But score one for Notre Dame. They get a very talented tackle prospect in Grayson McKeogh, and I think he is going to be excellent once he gets on campus in South Bend. All right, so that is it for the recruiting coverage on this episode, but we're going to have a lot more coming right tomorrow. But coming up on this show, should Notre Dame be a bigger favorite over Miami in week 1? And could the Irish be ranked number 1 in the country by middle of October? That's next. Today's episode is brought to you by Monarch Money. Ever check your bank account and wonder, where did all my money go? Between dining out, online shopping, and entertainment, it's easy to lose track. That's where Monarch Money comes in, your personal CFO giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app, it is a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place, so you stop just managing your money and start building wealth. When I started using Monarch, I realized just how much I was spending on food delivery. Now I budget smarter and save more. But my favorite thing about Monarch is that it helps you with your short and long-term goals, and instead of juggling multiple apps, you can use Monarch to check your finances, track spending, and plan long-term goals. Managing money with your partner is easier and smoother than ever. You can track shared and personal accounts, set goals, and stay on the same page without the stress. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONCollege at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONCollege for half off your first year. All right, now it's time for the mailbag, and our first question comes from Tony Kid 199. How do you feel like Notre Dame matches up with Miami week 1? So Tony is a Miami fan, from what I can tell, but he has been hitting me up nonstop with the same exact question. So today I'm finally going to give it to him. Tony, thank you for your patience. Let's talk about that game between Notre Dame and Miami in the season opener. I have not done my full deep dive into all of Notre Dame's opponents yet, but this is just my initial impression. As we get closer and closer to the start of the season, I do my deep dive into all of the college football teams, but specifically the teams that Notre Dame is going to be playing. And, especially in these days, you got to learn about all the different guys who transferred, what the rosters look like, depth chart, new faces, new coaching staff, all that stuff. But in the case of Miami, I think Notre Dame matches up pretty well with the Hurricanes. Right now, if you look at FanDuel, Notre Dame is favored by 1.5 on the road. I know that some Notre Dame fans think they should be favored by more. Honestly, I think that is a pretty adequate line considering the circumstances here. I do think that the Hurricanes are going to try and air it out under Carson Beck, but he is coming off a serious injury, and I do have a lot of faith in Notre Dame secondary. If Beck is healthy and he's ready to go, he's 100%, then I would expect big things from him this season, because it's easy to write him off after a pretty disappointing season last year with the Bulldogs. I mean, going into the season, some people had him as the number 1 overall draft pick in way too early mock drafts. I never quite understood that. I never thought Beck was that good, but I certainly thought he was better than what he showed last year. But I think once we saw that Georgia team, even though that was a great win for Notre Dame, they didn't really have any elite players on the outside. They didn't have a Brock Bowers at tight end or anyone like that. So it wasn't all on Carson Beck, although he did make some horrible decisions last year. And if he does that again against Notre Dame, I do believe that they're going to make him pay. I think the battle of this game is going to be on the line of scrimmage. That's going to determine the outcome in this game, in my opinion. Miami has been getting much better on the defensive line, and we know that offensive lines, even the best ones, even though we have really high expectations for Notre Dame offensive line this season, they aren't always clicking out of the gate. Just think back to 2020. I've made this comparison before on the podcast. Notre Dame was carried by their offensive line. That was a staple. That's how they were able to run all over teams later on in the year. They were physically just a better team than Clemson, at least in the regular season game of that year. Joe Moore Award semifinalists, all that stuff. That season opener against Duke, they didn't look that great on the offensive line. And Liam Eichenberg even said it takes a couple games for everyone to mesh together. So I have a lot of confidence that Notre Dame is going to have a great offensive line this year. They just probably aren't going to be close to their potential in week 1. But the same can be said about Miami. So it's going to be on the defensive lines of both teams to really get after it, get in the backfield and make some plays. But ultimately, I do believe that Notre Dame's talent is going to win out in this game. I just think that with Jeremiyah Love, they're going to force feed him the ball in this game, probably more so than any other game. And I think it's going to be a great opportunity for Malachi Fields to step up in his first game at Notre Dame. And also Jaden Greathouse, the last time he played at Hard Rock Stadium, he had the game of his life. So if he can duplicate that, then he's going to make life a little bit easier on CJ Carr, Kenny Minchey, whoever ends up winning the starting job. But whoever it is, if it's Carr, if it's Minchey, they're going to not only make their first start in college football, it's going to be the first time they see any significant action playing college football. That's a very hostile environment. Might not be what it was in 2017, but it is going to be a very difficult place to play. Plus, late August, very hot. They're going to have first game jitters, all that stuff. So I think whoever ends up being the quarterback is probably going to make a mistake or two, going to keep Miami in it. But ultimately, I do think Notre Dame is going to win, but I do expect it to be close. All right, next up, Drew Brennan, 77. He asks if on Sunday, October 5th, Notre Dame's record is 5-0 with wins over Miami, Texas A&M, Purdue, Arkansas, Boise State. Should the Irish be ranked number 1? Name a top team who would have a better resume at that point of the season. This is a good question. I think it's exciting to think about, right? Notre Dame being the top-ranked team in the country by October. But Drew, I do think you might be overstating Miami and Texas A&M a little bit. That's not to say that they won't be very tough games, because I do think that's going to be a very big challenge for Notre Dame coming out of the gate if they're able to start off 2-0. That would be a big win for the team. If they start off 1-1, not the end of the world. They could still finish 11-1. They'd make the playoff, all that stuff. But Miami is probably not going to be a top 10 team. Probably not even a top 15 team. They're going to be ranked, but probably closer to 25th than 10th. Same thing with Texas A&M. So they could be ranked wins, but they're not going to be in the top 10. Whereas Texas and Ohio State, two teams who are definitely going to be ranked in the top 5, they play each other in week 1. So whoever wins that game could have the best win of the season on their resume in October. Penn State is a number 1 on a lot of preseason rankings, or at least way too early stuff. There've not been official like preseason coaches poll, preseason AP, or anything like that. But just based on what I've seen from writers and different college football analysts out there, a lot of people have Penn State 1. I understand they return a lot of production. I don't see it. Not to say that Penn State isn't going to be a good team this year. I just don't think they're going to be the number 1 team in the country. But let's say they are the preseason number 1 team. Well, they play Oregon, who I would also expect to be a top 10 team, on September 27th. If Penn State is undefeated and they got a win over Oregon at home, they'd probably be ranked ahead of Notre Dame because that win over Oregon would be better than Notre Dame's win over Miami or Texas A&M. The winner of Alabama-Georgia could also be number 1 because they also play each other on September 27th. If you haven't looked at the slate for September 27th, do it. It's basically this year's version of October 12th. Last year, October 12th had a ton of good games. It had Ohio State-Oregon, Red River rivalry. Who else was that week? USC-Penn State. There's playoff baseball. There was all kinds of great games, and then Notre Dame destroyed Stanford that day. But that was a huge weekend of college football. September 27th is going to be a massive weekend for college football. And if Alabama beats Georgia, Georgia beats Alabama, and they're undefeated at that point in time, that's probably a better win than anything Notre Dame has. Also, keep in mind, Clemson is going to be ranked pretty high. They play LSU week 1. People are very high on both teams going into the season. So if either one of those teams are undefeated, they could be ahead of Notre Dame. So Notre Dame is going to have a strong resume, no doubt, if they are 5-0 at this point in the season. But they wouldn't have a top 10 win, whereas all the other teams I mentioned, if they win the marquee game that I just talked about and they're undefeated at that point, I would guess that they're probably ranked ahead of Notre Dame. But by that point, by early October, it doesn't even really matter all that much. The only thing that would be important at that juncture would be that Notre Dame is undefeated, and then they put themselves in a great position to make the playoff because the college football playoff rankings don't even come out till November. But it is exciting to think about Notre Dame being ranked number 1 in the country, light up Grace Hall, all of that. But I'm not worried what the ranking is in October. All I care about is what it is at the very end of the season. All right, up next, how does Notre Dame's culture stack up to the best in college football? Plus, why I don't think Jeremiyah Love is going to be a legitimate contender for the Heisman Trophy. That's coming your way right after this. All right, we got a couple more questions left on today's show. This next one comes from Jude Smith, 59. With all the talk about the culture at Notre Dame, what other programs would you rank as having the best culture in college football, and what attributes best describe Notre Dame's culture? I would say that culture is a very overused word in sports. It's a great poster, it's great on a t-shirt, but it is also extremely important, especially in football. So even though I do think that people don't always use the word in the right capacity, some teams say they have a good culture when in reality they don't. It is so important to have a great one if you want to win at the highest level, and Notre Dame is certainly at the very top in college football. I believe that within the Notre Dame program, accountability is huge. And in the NIL era, it is so easy for the players to blame everyone else for their struggles. They leave at the first sign of adversity. But at Notre Dame, I do think that there is a general understanding of accountability, not just with the players, the coaching staff, the support staff. Everyone understands their responsibility to the program. And if they don't live up to their expectations, if they don't do what is necessary, then it is on them. That doesn't happen at every other program. And you see a lot of guys who come into their schools, big-time recruits out of high school, they don't play their first year, and they're out the door. That doesn't really happen at Notre Dame because another great reason why they have such a great culture is the buy-in. Not only to the staff, like the players have great buy-in to the staff. Sorry if you hear the sirens in the background. I live on a main road. But the players are just bought into what Marcus Freeman and his staff are preaching, but they're also bought into the University of Notre Dame. They understand what a Notre Dame degree and what a Notre Dame education provides for them off the field, which is another reason why you didn't see that many guys leave in the transfer portal after this past season, to the point where I was actually shocked by how few players left for the transfer portal. I mean, they lost Steve Angeli, they lost Kennedy Urlacher, they lost a couple guys at the bottom of the depth chart, and then if you go back to the winter cycle, obviously losing Pat Coogan and Rocco Spindler hurts the depth, but those guys weren't even guaranteed to start anyway. So players are really bought into the university, and also a lot of the guys I mentioned, Angeli, Coogan, Spindler, they all have their degrees from Notre Dame. So The players are bought in to the football program, the coaching staff, and also the university. They want to stick around to get their degree. But I also think that Marcus Freeman and the entire coaching staff, everyone who is involved with the football program, have developed a family atmosphere that is real, it's legit, and you saw that in the recruiting trip this past weekend. Like, they're already applying that atmosphere and that structure, that bond between people to the recruits, most of which haven't even committed yet. And I think that tells you how important it is for Marcus Freeman and his staff, and is why they have developed such a strong culture. And I do want to say, like, for as much as Marcus Freeman has done, he's done a lot. He has certainly elevated the program since he came over as the head coach. Like, Notre Dame had a really strong culture before him. Like Kyron Williams, Kyle Hamilton, a lot of the leaders on those teams, they helped build this culture. This has been going on for years and years. There have been some peaks and valleys, right? Some bumps along the road. There's been some down years. But I think overall, the culture of the Notre Dame football program has stayed strong, and it has continued to get better. And a huge reason why is because of Marcus Freeman. Now, as for the other best cultures in college football, just look at the best teams every year. That's usually a pretty good indication. Alabama, their football culture was the gold standard under Nick Saban. I do think it's a little bit different now under Kalen DeBoer, which is to be expected. Nick Saban was the greatest coach in college football history, and he ran that program. He had his tentacles everywhere. He understood everything that was going on in his program, and it is kind of funny, on different podcasts and stuff, hearing from NFL players who went to Alabama, and they just talk about how different it was, how hard their workouts were, how they got coached so hard. Like, it was just different there, and that's why they won a bunch of national championships. Nick Saban was able to get the best players in the country to come to his school, and then once they got there, he coached them hard, he developed them, and then they turned out to be great college football players, went on to the NFL. So I would say, like, in terms of football culture, what Alabama had under Nick Saban, that was the best of the best. Ohio State, as much as it pains me to say it, they do have a strong culture. They recruit exceptionally well. Sure, a lot of the guys on the team are making big money, but they only really go out in the transfer portal when they need it. A lot of their best players are homegrown guys, and they have managed to figure out a way to keep them all bought into the program, even though they're getting paid a ton of money. Like, Caleb Downs is probably one of the highest paid players in all of college football. I've heard that guy speak. He is like a motivational speaker already, and he's going to be a junior in college. He's mature beyond his years. He basically made the staff take down all the national championship stuff from last year because he said this team hasn't done anything. Like, that is the type of leader you need. Yeah, sure, he's making a bunch of money. Yeah, sure, he's one of the best players in the country. He's going to get a ton of accolades, but he is a great leader, and it's guys like that set the standard for everyone else in the locker room, which is a big reason why Ohio State has a good culture. This is like gross to say, but Michigan, they had a strong culture under Jim Harbaugh. It's what really propelled them to a national championship, but I'm not so sure they have as good of a culture under Sherrone Moore. They appear to be a mess, and that's what I'm rooting for, right? Because I certainly do not I don't want Michigan to win ever again. I already had to witness a Michigan national championship. That is going to sit with me forever. But Jim Harbaugh did have things clicking when he was there, but then he left. Penn State, I would say they have a good locker room culture. You don't see a ton of their players leave and go other places, but I just think they lack the talent to get over the top. But I think, inside that locker room, they've got a good thing going there. Clemson has a strong one too. It's easy to make fun of Dabo, but his players love him, and they typically don't leave, except for Bo Collins. But they don't go out and they don't get guys in the transfer portal, and Dabo always says it's because he wants his players in his locker room, the guys that he recruited to go to Clemson, he wants to empower them. And even though I think that strategy is certainly flawed, they should go out and get a couple guys in the transfer portal. Like, Notre Dame goes out and they get players in the transfer portal, and they still have a really good culture. But I think that the buy-in from the players on that team is legitimate, and they've been recruiting a lot better, and I think that they are going to be a lot better on the field this season. Lastly, I think Oregon is building something pretty special under Dan Lanning, but I would not put any of these programs and their locker room culture over Notre Dame, but I do think that they are at the top. Well, other than Alabama under Nick Saban. That they were here, everyone else is below them. All right, we got one more question left, though. Let's get to it here. Samuel Suckup, 2207. Will Jeremiyah Love get enough touches to be a Heisman contender? Riley Leonard ate up a lot of touches last year, but how do you see carries being divided up this year? As for Jeremiyah Love, the short answer is no, even though I think he is undoubtedly one of the top 5 most talented players in all of college football. He's going to get a lot of carries early on against Miami and against Texas A&M. And then I think after those 2 games, they're going to incorporate some level of load management to keep him rested because Notre Dame has aspirations for a long postseason run, and they have got to keep him healthy. If you actually look at the game log last year, there's multiple games where he had single-digit carries like Florida State, like Army, although he did have 130 yards against Army. He just had 7 carries and 2 touchdowns in that game. Didn't get the ball much against Stanford, and I do believe that it was tactical, basically. The coaching staff was trying to preserve him as much as possible. Then he suffered that freak injury against USC, and it certainly hurt him in the playoffs, but you're going to see a lot more of that this year. And even though you look at last year, right? Riley Leonard had the most carries on the team with 184, sacks included though, so that number is a little bit skewed. It's not like 184 designed runs. Jeremiyah Love was second with 163, and Jadarian Price had 120. By comparison, Ashton Jeanty, who finished second in the Heisman race last year, had 374 carries last year and 23 catches. That is over 200 more carries than Jeremiyah Love in less games. And he finished second in the Heisman. Derrick Henry, he won the Heisman. That year he had 395 carries. That's insane. Now, Derrick Henry is like built in a lab or something. He's not even a real human. So even though Love is probably going to get more carries this season, he'll probably be closer to 200. I think that they will be spread out. I think Jadarian Price is going to be right behind him, and then Aeneas Williams at third. So he's just not going to get enough carries. He's not going to put up the level of stats in order to win the Heisman as a running back. He could very well be invited to New York. Again, I think he's going to have an exceptional season. He's extremely talented. I think he's the best running back in the country. But if you're going to win the Heisman as a non-quarterback, you have to be putting up insane numbers, and I just don't think the coaching staff is going to be willing to give Jeremiyah Love that level or that amount of touches for good reason, right? A Heisman is great. National championship would be better, and I think Notre Dame is going to prioritize Jeremiyah Love and save him for the college football playoff so long as they make it. But again, even though I don't think he's going to win the Heisman, I think he's going to have an incredible season, and I cannot wait to watch number 4 carry the ball one more year, because after this year, he's going to be a first-round NFL draft pick. That is going to do it for this episode. Thanks for making this your first watch or listen of the day. If you have not already, be sure to hit that subscribe button, leave a rating, leave a review, and keep those mailbag questions coming in the comments or on social. Like I said at the top, I'm going to be back tomorrow. Could be another massive day for Notre Dame recruiting, and I will be there to break it all down. I'll see you then.